Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rachakodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Proselytes, Esther 8:17. And pretty much this video is inspired by, a video that Elder Pastor did earlier, but I was starting to watch Elder Pastor Gabar's video. I'm not sure what minute marker I stopped at, but I wanted to go back and check on something because I hadn't read this in a while. But, this is an argument by these so-called Christians that try to use, that all nations can become Jews, and that's not the case. To be a Jew or an Israelite is a nationality, not a religion. Now you have religious rights where people, over the years have so-called converted, but you also have the nationality. All right, so you have to get that correct. It's not the nationality that they can convert to. These individuals that have so-called converted or been forcibly converted, as in the case of the Edomites, was to a religion called Judaism. All right, which is not biblical. Judaism is not biblical. All right, the form of Judaism that they practice anyway today is not biblical because it goes back to the Talmud. Now you have customs and practices and the Commonwealth of Israel, which belongs to the Israelites. But there's one point I want to bring out in here to show you the reason why these individuals, converted to being called Jews or to the religion of the Jews. But before I get to that, I want to get to the book of Acts chapter 2, where Pastor David Lynn brought out this scripture, which tells you who this is dealing with. But, he went to the word proselytes and trying to say that was the other nations, which is not. And we're going to explain that, which Elder Pastor already went over it. I just want to hit a different point in the book of Esther to show you the reason why. Acts 2:5, and they were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews. The bottom line, these were Israelites that knew that they were Israelites that came from these different foreign countries. Now you had those that spoke the different languages, but they still knew that they were Israelites, and they will come to Jerusalem 3 times in a year for the Passover, the Feast of First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's what the Lord, ordained, in the law for all of the males of the Lord, that they have to come to Jerusalem 3 times in the year on these appointed feasts. It says devout men out of every nation under heaven, because these Israelites came from every nation under heaven. Why? Because the Israelites were scattered. And this is one thing that they're trying to get away from, is the scattering of the Israelites. They don't want to touch that subject. When we go to the book of James 1:1 real quick, James, a servant of the Most High, and of the Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes, not the whole world, the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. So where are they scattered abroad at? Among the nations, as the prophecies stated, in the curses. If you don't keep my law, statutes, and commandments, one of the things that's going to happen to you is you're going to be scattered among the nations. And when you go to the word scattered, you have the word diaspora, a scattering, dispersion of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations. And this is the Jews that were in Jerusalem that were coming to keep the feast, because the heathens could not keep the feast of the Passover. That's stated in the book of Exodus 12. The strangers that could keep the Passover that were circumcised were the Israelite sojourners. All right, the ones that did not live in the land of Israel, but came to the land of Israel to keep these different feasts. But they had to make sure that all of their males were circumcised before they can partake in the feast. It says, of the Christians scattered abroad among the Gentiles, which they're reaching with this, you could apply it to the Israelite foreigners that were among the heathens, but this has nothing to do with the heathens, the diaspora. It has everything to do with the Israelites that were dispersed, because the nations, the heathens, the actual nations, they were never, the Lord never said that he would disperse them because they didn't keep his law, statutes, and commandments, because he never gave these nations the law, statutes, and commandments. Now, did they go into captivity under certain nations? Yeah, but the main curse of the scattering is dealing with the Israelites that were dispersed, or the Israelites that were dispersed among foreign nations. And that's who we're reading about here in Acts 2 and 5. They were dwelling at Jerusalem, Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now, when we jump down to the 10th verse, it's giving us some of the places where they were scattered to. Okay, Phrygia and Pamphylia in Egypt, and in parts of Libya about Cyrene, which these were all places up in Asia Minor, down in Egypt, so-called Africa, and northern parts of Africa, which you had Israelites scattered all throughout that region. All right. You had the Alexandrian Jews, which came out of Egypt. Then you had the Cyrenian Jews, which came out of Cyrene. These were all in northern Africa. And strangers of Rome, which are Israelites that were scattered in Rome, that were strange to Rome. They were Israelites that were strangers, and all these knew that they were Israelites. Jews, the ones that knew that they were Jews, and proselytes. Now, a proselyte is a convert, right? And a convert is either an Israelite foreigner that converts back to being an Israelite, or you have a proselyte, which is the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, that were following behind the Sanhedrin, or that order of the Pharisees and Sadducees in them, back or to Yahushua, which is something known as convincing the gainsayer. Okay. They were following the customs of the Pharisees and the traditions, and they went from that to following the Messiah, Yahushua. They were converted from that. But you also had the Israelite foreigners that were coming back to the fold, but this applied to the Jews that knew that they were Jews, that left, following behind that custom to Israel. To the Messiah, to Yahushua. Okay. So let's look up this word proselytes. It says a newcomer, proselytos, a newcomer, a stranger, alien, a proselyte, one who has come over from a Gentile religion to Judaism, which you had the Apostle Paul spoke about these things. You know that you were Gentiles, meaning you Israelite foreigners that were Gentiles. Now you're coming back to the fold. And that's why he said, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. But this proselyte also extends to those that followed behind the traditions of the Pharisees and Sadducees, and them coming back or coming to the understanding of Yahushua and the grace that was extended, that the Pharisees and Sadducees did not extend, because they were ruling with a strict, with an iron fist, so to speak. Okay, that's why the Apostle Peter said, why are you trying to put a yoke upon the neck of these disciples that neither we couldn't keep, our fathers couldn't keep? And these are newcomers to the faith. These are Israelite foreigners coming to the faith. You can't expect them to keep everything. But after, once you get involved in the ministry and you grow, then you will be keeping more and more of the customs and more of, what is required of you. You have to go through a process. That's why the Apostle Paul said, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. So building on this, right, when you go to the book of Esther, chapter 8, verse 17, it says, in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness. Yeah, because they were delivered. Our forefathers were delivered from the hands of Haman, from our enemies. A feast and a good day, which still kept to this day, which is the feast of Purim, which the word Purim is the word Purim is the plural way of saying lots. It says, and many of the people of the land, meaning of the other nations, became Jews. And this is the reason why, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. So what I did was, Wi-Fi is not ready. what I did was I went to the NLT, and when you read the NLT, it explains why even further they became or wanted to be called Jews or follow the ways of Israel back then because of this reason. And then we're going to go back and we're going to read the chapter so you get a better understanding. In every province and city, whenever the king's decree arrived, the Jews rejoiced and had a great celebration and declared a public festival and holiday. And many of the people of the land became Jews themselves, for they feared what the Jews might do to them. Why is that? Because of the letter that was signed, sealed, and given to Esther, which Esther went to Mordecai and he dictated, they put together what was to be within, this letter. And it wasn't very nice for the other nations. So it was a great fear because they knew what happened to Haman. They knew what happened to his son. And the decree was against any nation that came against the Israelites, they were to be put to death. Yeah, vocab is not ready either. So let's read it from the top. Esther 8:1. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in thy sight, let the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written. See, so she was asking for a decree, a royal decree from the king, a royal law to reverse the letters, because there were letters written against the Israelites to destroy them. And that's what that's what Haman was going to Xerxes for. He was going to him to ask him to allow him to destroy Mordecai and the Jews, right? So she was asking now that everything came out and Haman was already destroyed, to reverse that law and make another law, to reverse it. It says to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. Now, when this was written, people knew about it, but they didn't say nothing about it. They didn't want to become an Edomite, because everything was against the Jews. They didn't want to become Edomites. It says, for how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Because Mordecai had instructed Esther not to tell the king who she was or who her people were, until the right set time. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. And I believe the next chapter is when they hung his sons too, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me correctly. Write ye also for the Jews. So this is a letter or a decree that was given by the king Xerxes, to send to all the provinces that they had, which is 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse. And these letters, which were laws, were read in every language of every nation, in all of the king's provinces. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the third month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and to the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, in 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. So every nation got a copy of this letter in their language, and it was read among them. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries. So it was delivered among all these people in the king's provinces, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life. To what? To destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So there was a law that was written and read that if any nation caused harm to the Israelites, they were to be destroyed till they perish. The power of them was supposed to be taken down. Their children, their women, their men, and to pretty much rob them of for a prey. So this went out. All right. So this was an order that went out upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, which is the 12th month, which is the 13th day at evening, which is the 14th and the 15th day, which is how we keep it. The copy of the writing for a commandment. See, so it was not just a letter; it was a commandment of the king Xerxes to be given in every province, was published unto all people. So when they heard it and they read it and they understood, they were scared. They were nervous because they knew what happened to Haman. They knew what happened to his sons. All right. Or actually, so they hang. Right. So the next, the 7th chapter. Esther 7 and 10, the water elder. So they hang Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. And I believe it's either the 9th chapter where they hung his sons too. But like I said, I would have to go back and fact check that. To avenge themselves, let me read this again. The copy of the writing was for a commandment to be given in every province, was published unto all people, and the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. And this wasn't just a letter, it was a commandment, it was a law. All right. Right. So it's the 9th chapter. Yep. Esther 9 and 14, the water, bro. And the king commanded it so to be done, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. That was just to put some more icing on the cake. So the post that rode upon mules and camels, these were your ancient mailmen, went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. See, so they were going in haste. They were moving fast. All right. And the decree was given at Shushan, the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel and blue and white. So the man and the people that this devil wanted to destroy were magnified, exalted, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad, right? Because Israel was rejoicing. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, which was the law, the Jews had joy and gladness, and a feast and a good day. Why? Because they were avenged of their enemy. That's why it's called Purim or lots, right? Which the lot that Haman tried to bring upon the Israelites came upon him and his sons and whoever was in that conspiracy. But it mainly mentions him and his sons. And many of the people of the land became Jews. Why? For the fear of the Jews fell upon them. So they weren't convinced, oh, you know what? I like that Jewish religion, so I'm going to just, become a Jew because, they got such a nice... No, they were scared. So they were trying to hide behind that. When there's a there's a passage in the Josephus where it speaks about the Samaritans, which were heathens, because the heathens were transplanted into the land of Israel, into the land of Samaria. So whenever there was good done unto the Israelites, they would say, yeah, we're Israelites too. But then whenever there was evil decreed upon them, they told the truth. No, we're not Israelites. You know, we're these nations that we were brought here by the king of Assyria and blah. That's when the truth would come out. So these people of these lands, they called themselves Jews because they were scared. They were scared of what was going to happen. They saw what happened to Haman and his sons, and they saw that the king had put a decree, an order, a law out there that anyone that raised up against the Israelites should be put to death. So they say, you know what, we're Jews too. Okay. Now the NLT, I like the way this is worded. In every Esther 8:17, in every province and city, wherever the king's decree arrived, the Jews rejoiced and had a great celebration and declared a public festival and holiday. And many of the people of the land became Jews themselves, for they feared what the Jews might do to them. You see? So they had fear. And then this one here, it says NIV, and many people of their other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews has seized them. So they were scared. They didn't want, the fate of Haman and his sons to come upon them. So they were trying to appease Israel back then. Almost like the scriptures say, their children shall seek to please the poor. So, these devils, they don't know what the hell is going on. And by the way, the Apostle Paul was playing Agrippa, all right? Because the Apostle Paul would use whatever situation was, as the scripture that Elder Pastor brought out, which was dealing with how he caught you with guile, through being crafty. Well, there's another instance, where the Apostle Paul knew that part of the people that he was talking to, of these Israelites, that part of them were Pharisees and part of them were Sadducees. So what did he do? He said that he was a Pharisee, right? And then what did that do? That divided the Israelites back then. So he used certain situations to his advantage. All right. So, be was wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. He knew that King Agrippa had the power to keep him locked up forever, or have him put to death, or hand it over to Israel. So what did he do? He used the court system back then to, appeal to Caesar. And then when he said that, he was playing that devil. But you guys don't know anything about that. The name Jacob itself means Jacob. Right there, beautiful. Acts 2:3-6. But when Paul perceived that the one part were Sadducees and the other part Pharisees, he cried out in the council, men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee of the hope and resurrection of the dead. I am called in question. And what did that do? That divided them. So that was a righteous way to cause dissension, which is what you could do it in righteousness, or you could do it in wickedness. When Israel was going off, and Moses said who was on the Lord's side and who was on that side, that was a separation. That was a dissension. It says, and when he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. So what did the Apostle Paul do in righteousness? He caused dissension between brethren. See? So you could do something in righteousness, or you could do it in wickedness. So that's pretty much it, That's what a proselyte is. You could use it for the Israelite foreigners coming back to the faith, which really the Israelite foreigners were coming to the sacrifice of Yahushua. The Jews that knew that they were Jews, that were following because back then we've done lessons and spoke about it. The people were afraid of them Pharisees and Sadducees, and they would not dare go against any of their decrees because they didn't want to lose their position in their seats in these synagogues. Because a lot of those chief rulers, believed, and they wouldn't confess because they didn't want to be put out. So some of those individuals eventually became what? Proselytized. Like there was a precept that Elder Pastor put up. on one of the lives that I did, and it spoke about the chief priest, because I know I was reading one where it says that the chief priests, they believed, but they wouldn't confess them because they didn't want to be put out. But another one said that a lot of them, converted and turned to the Lord. Those are the proselytes. They went from following the Pharisees and Sadducees to following the Lord. Let's see. Moral. I'm not sure where exactly where it is. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but there's one that mentions that. So that's an example of a proselytizing from the following behind the Pharisees and Sadducees, for lack of better words, to following behind the Lord Yahushua. Okay, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but Lord's will, if I find it, I may post it in the comment section if I remember. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that could be used as an example. St. John 19:38 that the elder put up. And after this, Joseph of Arimathea, which was following behind what the Pharisees, Sadducees, and them, I'm more than likely, I believe, Pharisees, being a disciple of Yahushua, but secretly for fear of the Jews. So he went from that to what? To following Yahushua. So this would be an example of proselytizing. Besought Pilate that he might take away the body of Yahushua, and Pilate gave him leave. He came therefore and took the body of Yahushua, right? Because the scripture and the prophecy said that he would be buried with the rich or something along those lines. All right. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. To the next time I say shalom.